Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our March meeting of the Joint Standards Committee of the City of York Council. Welcome to those members of the committee that you can see on screen, and there are a number of people that you won't be able to see on screen, but are in the meeting. I also want to welcome those that are watching this remotely through YouTube, either live or at some point in the future. We welcome you to this particular meeting. Going to move on to item number 1, which is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No, that's fine. Slightly remiss of me, it's not a great start, is it? But I just do need to welcome a new member to our committee, and that's Parish Councillor Mark Woolby. Mark has joined the committee, so welcome to the Joint Standards Committee as a Parish Council member. Item number 2 on the agenda is the exclusion of press and public, and just for us as a committee to agree that when we come to item number 11, we would need to exclude the press and public from that particular item. So can I just have an agreement from members that you are happy to do that, please? You just indicate by waving. That's good. Thank you very much. So we shall do that at that point. The next item is the minutes, and you'll find in your pack the minutes of the last meeting, and that was held on the 20th of January. So if you want to have, I've had a look through those, and there was nothing that I felt I needed to address on there. But Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise under item 74, which is the international travel protocol, that we did discuss that if travel wasn't to be paid by the council, that it should be made clear as to who it has been paid for by, and I didn't see any mention of that in the minutes.
Okay. Is that something that we can add into that, please? Yeah, can I get a nod from Janie or from somebody who's yeah, that's fine, thank you. Yeah, so we'll include that.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, it's okay to add that into the minutes as long as the members agree.
Yeah,
as long as the members agree to the inclusion in the minutes.
Yeah, everybody happy with that? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we'll with that addition, are you happy for me to sign off when I eventually get a paper copy? You just indicate you're happy for me to sign the minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is urgent business. We have no urgent business for the meeting that's been reported to us for this afternoon. So that brings us on to item number 5, which is public participants. We have one member of the public registered to speak this afternoon, and that's Gwen Swinburne. And Gwen knows the protocol very well, so I don't need to remind her of the time. And I'm going to ask Gwen, please, if you'd like to address us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
You can, great. Chair, I've written to City of York Council members to update you all on the current, now farcical position of my standards complaint dropped by the monitoring officer against every president. As the monitoring officer has steadfastly refused to publish the reason for dismissing my complaint without proper process, and then airbrushing it and one other, I would like to thank you and the Deputy Chair for insisting she issued a supplemental agenda that finally, 8 months after submission, articulates the reason she used to dismiss my complaint. It is clear that it was not even considered, as we all can see. Instead, she broke with all precedent and dismissed my complaint instead of holding on to it until Mazar's investigation was complete and then putting it through the system. You will, I expect, be as concerned as I am that the monitoring officer has, despite going to the trouble of publishing a supplementary agenda, again refused to publish the reason she dismissed the other complaint against the leader, the one from the councillors this time, that took just 9 days from deposit to committee to dismiss. Don't forget, the only 2 complaints not given a reason for dismissal were dismissed by the monitoring officer against the leader. Chair, I, and I am not alone, have lost all trust and confidence in the monitoring officer being able to fairly manage standards complaints, particularly regarding executive members. As a consequence, may I ask that until anything changes, all standards complaints against executive members be referred to this committee, withdrawing any delegations from the monitoring officer that she currently exercises. I'm sorry it has come to this, but as members know, I had anticipated such difficulties and asked, in order to assist the leader and staff, that my complaints be referred to peers and another authority. The monitoring officer not only declined to do this, she totally ignored my suggestion. So we are where we are. You can step in. You should step in. Please do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gwen. Your comments have been received and have been noted.
Thank you very much, Chair. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. So there are no other public speakers, so we'll move on to the items on the agenda. And item number 6 is the next item, and that's the draft annual report. You will recall that we swiftly put to full council earlier this month the first of our annual reports, literally we had a 30 seconds to put it to council, and it was accepted. Can I say that doesn't in any way reflect the importance of the report? It's just unfortunate that the full council was so full in terms of its business that towards the end it had to rush through some of these things. But the annual report is really important to us. You'll also remember that we did our first annual report and presented it at the last full council meeting. We want to get into a routine where every municipal year we look back at the previous municipal year, and then the report is presented to full council. So we need to look at the draft annual report for the current municipal year, which will go to full council. Janie, currently is it in July, the July meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, so Janie, over to you just to talk to this.
So thank you, Chair. So what we've provided for you here is the model that we used on the last occasion. So either please reflect, if you want to change it in any way, please do. But this is literally, I appreciate we've only just, as the Chair said, finished discussions on the last one, but this is now for the year 2020-2021. So we're actively seeking your views in respect of its content. We can change its template if you like. We can fill in the details. Chair, it's kind of over to you. If members would like time to just reflect and consider the contents of it and come back to us separately, we can report it back to a future meeting of this committee for final approval. So it's really in the hands of yourselves. But this is a retrospective report on the year 2020-2021.
Yeah. So I am going to just open this up for members to question and comment and give us their thoughts. So again, if you would like to raise your virtual hand, I'll see that and bring you in. And then obviously if there's supplementaries, just raise your physical hand. Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just seek a point of clarification? On page 10, which is actually page 2 of the report, it says that the committee noted a dispensation given by the monitoring officer of the 6-month rule for City of York councillors in relation to attendance at meetings. Now, is that meetings of the Joint Standards Committee, or is that meetings of the full council?
No, it's meetings of City of York Council. there was a period of time where some people, for example, the Lord Mayor, I think you may recall when we had the debate, was actually unable to attend a meeting within the 6-month period because the City of York Council didn't have a full council meeting in the relevant 6-month period due to the lockdown and then the delivery of remote meetings regulations. So this is not just relating to attendance at Joint Standards Committee, it was for all City of York councillors for all meetings.
Does that dispensation extend to parish councils?
No, it doesn't.
Right.
No, it's just City of York councillors. I think we had this debate. I think Councillor Fisher, who's not here today, expressed some frustration.
I apologise to covering old ground again, but it's something that is pertinent to our parish council. Who, therefore, if you are the authority for giving a dispensation to City of York Council, who is the authority to give the dispensation to a parish council?
So I can't just answer that off the top of my head. I would probably have to look at your own constitution as a parish council in terms of attendance. And I would also have to just check the relevant legislation as well about any sort of bespoke wording for parish councils. But I've only focused on City of York Council.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You've resolved the issue. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I've got a supplementary question to that, Janie. So that dispensation was for a period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's I think this committee didn't want it open-ended, so this committee put a time bar on it. And from memory, I'm trying to think, but I think it was January. I think it was either 31st of December. I think from memory.
I think that, yeah.
So this committee put the time bar on it, and by which time we did actually meet and have a full council meeting, which members were present at, because our particular concern was around the Lord Mayor.
Yeah, and so because we have been meeting remotely, there's no need for such a dispensation moving forward now, is there?
No, there isn't,
okay.
Chair.
Lovely. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Janie, is it worth putting in the report then that this dispensation expired on the 31st of December, just so everybody's clear?
Yeah, absolutely. We can add that. I'm sure it was December. From memory,
yeah,
I'd have to get back, but
I
feel convinced it was December.
Yeah, I think you're right. Any other questions or comments on that? What I'd like to do is just to give you all the opportunity to thoroughly read through that draft, and if you have got anything that you'd like adding to that. Rather than closing it down at this meeting, I think what would be prudent is if you have anything to add to that, if you can email it to myself and the Vice Chair and to Janie, and then what we can do, we can hopefully look at the final report that will then go to Council at our next meeting. Is that all right with you, Janie?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that okay with members? You're happy with that? Yeah, lovely. Thank you. But I do think it's an important document, and one that at some full council in the future might get the airtime it probably deserves, rather than just being nodded through at the end there. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 7, which is update on the model code of conduct. And you'll remember that this has been out for consultation, and there's been a lot of work done on this behind the scenes. So I'm going to ask Janie just to speak to this, and then I'll open it up for members just to have their say. Janie.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the committee was particularly active, I think, in responding to the outcomes from the Committee of Standards in Public Life and the consultation around the draft model code that was circulated. So as the report says, a model code was published in December 2020, and there was an updated version issued in January 2021. So we've included that model code with this report, and also included the current code of conduct for members. This is here for your consideration at this moment in time. You're not being asked to implement this across City of York right now, because there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done, and we also need to do consultation with all members of City of York Council, and there's an opportunity as well for parish councils to consider the model code as well. So what we've done, Rachel and I, in terms of the report, is try and try and break down the model code into the separate sections and add comments for members to consider as we go through the code. So the code is very different to the current code. The current code that we have was adopted following, I hate the phrase again, but sorry about this, but a model code following the publication of the Localism Act. And a model code was issued by the LGA at that time around the early part of 2012. And many councils adopted that model code then, and then have subsequently adopted it or localized it to meet local need. There are opportunities for this model code from the LGA to be localized, if you like. So again, this is part of members perhaps discussing this, and also, as I say, there will be consultation with all members across City of York Council as well. But Chair, we can either just take general feedback based on the comments that we've put in the report, or go through the model code in accordance with the breakdown in the report. It's entirely up to you how you would like to manage that.
Yeah, so rather than going through it line by line and bit by bit, I'd be interested to hear what members of the committee have to say, for those of you that have had a look at it. I appreciate it is still a work in progress, but it's important that as a committee we understand it and we approve it before it goes to full council. So I'm going to open this up for comment and debate. So if anybody would like to speak. So I think in the order they came in, if it comes up on my screen in the order that your hands went up, because you both went up very quickly, I'm going to break with protocol and not go to ladies first. I'm going to go to Councillor Carr and then Councillor Douglas. Councillor Carr.
I'd be quite happy to let Councillor Douglas go first, but the thing that strikes me about this is, first of all, it's very comprehensive, and it's almost a manual rather than a code. And I just wondered if we were going to try and make it in, or bring it into a more digestible form for circulation to members, because I can see a lot of members basically being put off by the amount of text in this code, and thereby the principal message we want to get across might be lost.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Douglas, I presume this is just supplementary, or maybe even yes, go on then, please.
Yeah, I can understand that it is quite comprehensive, but what struck me was that I thought it was also very clear at the same time as being comprehensive. And also I felt as though this were the kind of code that I think it would be really helpful for our members to be reminded of on a regular basis and asked to actually return to remind themselves of what they've actually signed up for, because you know, best will in the world, we're all very busy and always have I feel personally a very clear idea of the code of conduct, but having read that, it really did jog my memory as to some of the finer detail and made me think about a few things. And I think that within member development, I wouldn't be adverse to us recommending that groups return to this on an annual basis, just to have a refresher and likely discussion as well, you know, around certain issues. So I think it has its merits being a longer document as well.
And I think you've made a good point, which I was going to make had you not, and that was that it kind of does link into member development, which is the next item that we're going to look at in a moment. But I just think, and again, Jane, I'm sure you probably agree that you know, this is such a comprehensive code, taking into account Councillor Carr's comments, maybe some form of abridged version could be available that could be used as part of your member development and certainly sit with group leaders.
So I absolutely agree that with Councillor Douglas, that some form of refresher or memory jog in effect of the code of conduct absolutely needs to be a fundamental form of member development, but I don't want to sway your views for the debate for the next item. I think the document, it would be quite difficult for me to kind of reduce the size of the model code unless we're really wanting to localize it, because for me, when I was reading it, because the definition of interest, for example, has changed, so it is of registerable interests. So I think you need to read the document as a whole in order to help you sort of determine whether you have an interest or not, to help you determine about the capacity in which you're viewed as a counsellor, for example. So I think it'd be very hard to. We can certainly see if the LGA have published like an executive summary style document that goes over the top of it, but I think I'd be reluctant to try and do a resume of this, because I do think it's quite a comprehensive document, and I think the more information that members have to help clarify positions, give certainty, give accuracy, give examples of understanding when they might be in a position as to when they perceive to be holding themselves out as a counsellor. I don't know. I think it'd be quite difficult for me to reduce down somewhat. I think how we've done this report in drawing members, excuse me, attention to actually questioning certain sections of the report of the model code is probably a helpful way of doing this. So highlighting certain aspects of this section means this. Do you perhaps doing a bit of a summary in that style, like we've done with this covering report, that might prove a bit more helpful to help guide people to the sections to read rather than your resume of the document itself.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm going to bring Councillor Carr and Councillor Douglas back in, but just before we do, I understand your concerns about localizing it, because localizing it more than it already has been, it essentially gives you a bigger document. And if we're saying that it's a big comprehensive document already, but I also agree that, you know, without wanting to step into the next item on the agenda, I think, you know, there could be something that we could do in terms of member development. Before I bring my two colleagues in, this is probably more for our new parish council representative member. In part one of the conduct, we've got the general provisions. It talks about this being a code of conduct for the City of York councillors. So I'm right in thinking this is just for City of York councillors. However, the bit that may be of interest to Councillor Chambers and Councillor Warby and Councillor Rawlings would be that it talks about this code also applies to any persons appointed as a co-opted member of the City Council or any of its committees. So does that therefore apply to our parish council members when they're sitting on this committee?
So the code of conduct that we've got now applies to co-opted members and this code says it applies to co-opted members who've got a right to vote. So this, for example, on Children's and Education Scrutiny Committee, there are certain co-opted members who have voting rights. So this would apply. Health and Wellbeing Board as well, it would apply. For parish councils, the LGA are recommending or advising parish councils to consider the code of conduct adopted by the principal authority and perhaps adopt the same code, because that makes kind of consistency for those members who are dual hatted. So if you're a parish councillor and a city councillor, for example, you follow one code and you're not kind of wondering which code you're following with which hat on, etc. So the LGA have left it open that parish councils can adopt the code of the principal authority, which is City of York in this instance, or they can look at the code that we may adopt and adapt that, or adopt the model code for their own volition and then let us know, or, you know, share with us their code of conduct so that we're informed with that. So the choices are there for the parish councils, really. It is up to them of what they would wish to do.
And has this been communicated to the chairs of the parish councils, or will it be at some point in the future?
So the LGA have consulted very heavily with parish council networks. Both Rachel and I have been having a meeting with the York Association of Local Councils, but unfortunately the meeting got cancelled for personal reasons from the representative of that association. So we're trying our hardest to meet with the representative body of parish councils that we have here at the moment. It's just unfortunate that that's just not happened yet, but it's certainly on our agenda to discuss with Sheena, I think she's called, to discuss with Sheena when we do actually meet with her. And obviously as well, we've got parish council representatives here who represent here on behalf of parish councils. Also perhaps a debate to be triggered in parish councils themselves, and the views and feedback taken from this committee into the parish councils. You'll see from the the complaints reports that we have a number of complaints from parish councils as well, all with different codes at the moment. So it is really quite difficult. So I think there is a debate to be had within the parish council community, let me put it that way.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm now going to bring my colleagues in. And Councillor Douglas, I did see your hand was still up, so please.
Thank you for that. It's around localisation of the code of conduct. As Councillor Carr has already said, it's the main document is very comprehensive, and then when you compare it to what we've got in place, which I assume is the work in process, Janie, of trying to incorporate some elements of the model code of conduct into what we originally had, or is that the totally original City of York Council code of conduct that you have provided with us as a second document?
The Annex A is the model code from the LGA, and Annex B is the current code of conduct that we've got, which originates from the 2012 template. So that is our current code of conduct that City of York Council has.
Yeah, and so
we haven't done any adoption at all.
Okay. So with relevance to that, I'm undecided as to what I think about this, in the sense of I think that the model code is very comprehensive and I think a good document, but there have been things that we've discussed as a committee around gifts and hospitality. We've spoken about the cumulative effect of multiple gifts and hospitality from one source that may be below £50 each time, but over a 12-month period may add up to £400 or £500, for example. It's possible. There have been issues that have come up with colleagues about register of interest when there's a spouse, partner, civil partner, any form of domestic living arrangement within councillors, that they need to declare interests in each other. And I'm not clear that that's really being applied consistently across the whole council at the moment. So if that is to be considered, that obviously isn't covered by the model code. And then the other one that is within the existing code for the City of York Council is about dispensations on register of interests and or disclosure of interest. And I wanted us to think about whether we thought that was appropriate to keep in there, or whether it's become outdated, or we want to change that if we are going to keep it. So that's item 45, page 45 on the CYC Code of Conduct, point 8. Bullet point 4 particularly was of concern to me. So those are the things that I think we need to think about, and obviously localising it makes it an even larger document than it is originally.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say and to emphasise what the monitoring officers just said about an executive summary. My intention is by no means to dilute the content of this document, but it is to try and put a covering document in a more digestible form. And I think in that way, we might get better take-up of the worthy content that it contains. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any more comments on this? Again, as with all the documents that we look at, I mean, this will come back on
Sorry,
our
can
work.
Sorry,
Jamie,
Chair,
go
can
on.
I just clarify, because I'm now a little bit, I think I'm now a little bit confused. So the LGA document that we've provided here at Annex A,
Yeah.
oh, I think someone's just fallen out of the meeting. The document that is here at Annex A is actually a code in itself. It's not an advisory document or anything. If we did a very, very basic and decided absolutely no amendments whatsoever, the Annex A document from the LGA would completely replace the document at Annex B, because Annex B is written on a different template with different styles. So what we would look to do is, looking at the LGA document, is then look at the LGA document and then pick the bits out, for example, that Councillor Douglas has just referenced, gifts and hospitality, alter the wording in the LGA template to the York version of that. So therefore, we would not have a code of conduct that looks like Annex B anymore. It would look like the LGA Annex A document. So what we would look to do is look at Councillor Douglas's comments, for example, change the reference around gifts and hospitality to something which this committee I know has debated about and concerned about that cumulative effect, and incorporate into the LGA template as opposed to using the current City of York template. So that's the sort of style that we were contemplating doing, so that we would follow the model code, the LGA, because it's that template that is at Annex A, which is the LGA is going to review every year in that format. So we could follow that. We could also make it clearer. For example, I think Councillor Douglas referenced register of interest around spouses. There's a slightly different definition in here about people who you live with, etc., and family members, and they say in here it might be difficult for you to know about family members circumstances. So we could make that a lot clearer within the LGA document, and localize it that way to adopt some of Councillor Douglas's comments. So I think that's the impression that Rachel and I were taking from this, is looking at the Annex A and adapting that rather than using the template at Annex B.
Yeah.
Sorry if I've missed the point.
No, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Janie, so does that mean that dispensations will disappear then, because they don't appear in the LGA document?
No, so dispensations sort of are dealt with differently by different councils. So sometimes there's dispensations are actually written into the terms of reference of some committees. So for example, they're very commonly found in scrutiny committee terms of references. Scrutiny committees often need to deal with, debate in the public interest items where some members have got a prejudicial interest, for example, i.e. there's a reasonable belief that if they had that debate, you'd come with a predetermined view, but in the interest of democracy, all members need to participate in that. So dispensations usually appear in the terms of reference of a committee. Historically, where dispensations were required was around council tax setting for budget council, for example. That is no longer required as a matter of law. So we don't need to have dispensations for things like budget council, where we used to in the past. But in our constitution, however, there's nothing to stop us having a dispensation which is still written in the terms of reference for the Joint Standards Committee. So we can still have that provision within the terms of reference of the Joint Standards Committee.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I suppose my point is that I totally agree with dispensation for the purposes of which you've outlined, but our current code of conduct on bullet point 4 says that basically, or for any other purpose that it is deemed appropriate, and I think it's actually way too loose, and I'd like to see that tightened up and dispensation being given for as minimally as possible, really, and no wiggle room to even suggest that dispensation is a good way to go, really, other than for what you've outlined. And so I would almost like to see us adopt something that is a model on that, rather than something that we've come up with locally, if that's at all possible.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. They are few and far between. Dispensations are few and far between. We report them, as you know, to this committee. They are few and far between. The dispensation that we mentioned earlier is quite a rare one, which is around the 6 monthly attendance at meetings. I think, circumstances where if it wasn't the pandemic issue that you would use that is instances of severe illness of a member, example, and you knew there was a justifiable reason why they couldn't physically attend a meeting. I had that experience in the past of a dispensation, but they are few and far between. But we'd still keep that provision in the Joint Standards Committee in terms of reference, for example. So we can look at it, absolutely.
Yeah, Claire, sorry, come back.
Sorry. This could be quite a long one. The dispensations that we have heard as a committee, etc., but the monitoring officer also has the ability to offer dispensation, and it should be recorded. But I'm not
on my own. I don't.
Okay.
Not on my own, I don't.
Okay.
It's very clear in this guidance.
Up procedures around that to make sure that absolutely doesn't happen.
Right,
and I think that within the current code of conduct, it is potentially able to happen without us necessarily being aware or anybody else.
So paragraph 2 of the current code of conduct under paragraph 8, it says that it can only do it in consultation with the chair of the Joint Standards Committee, and they're all reported retrospectively. So I do not have ability to grant a dispensation unilaterally without consulting with the chair of the Joint Standards Committee, and I'm also required to retrospectively report that decision. So I do not, in the current constitution, have any ability to grant a dispensation without consulting with the chair.
Okay, thank you. Rachel,
I would not want that to change either. I don't think that's appropriate.
No. Okay. So, Rachel, I'm aware you've had your hand up for a while. You want to participate?
That's okay. I'm just wondering if a way forward is that members consider whether they look to. I think the question is: do the council stay the same? Do the council adopt the LGA model, or do they do some sort of hybrid? And I'm wondering if the way the conversation's going, that what members' thoughts are on adopting the model, but then we've done it in the past when we've looked at the code of conduct. We've had a task group. Councillor Douglas will probably recall maybe being on a task group where the task group go through the various clauses and do some in-depth work on the kinds of themes that they might want including into the model code.
Yeah. Janie, I mean, I think that's a way forward. Forgive me. I just want to just come in at this point. Janie and Lawrence, if you're there, can you just hear me? Can I just ask, please, that we just suspend this meeting for one moment, please? And can you put us all in the breakout room? There's a specific reason for this, but can I just ask that the meeting is suspended and all those that are currently present are put into a breakout room, please? And then I'll explain why in a moment.
Yes, I can do that now. Lawrence, if you could put up the holding screen, please.
Chair. You're on mute.
Thank you. They automatically muted me. Thank you for those that have been watching for allowing me just to have a brief break there. We are now back in the public meeting, and we're going to continue where we left off, which is discussing the model constitution. Now, it may well be that my colleagues had indicated they wanted to say something prior to us going into a breakout group there, and so if you did want to speak to this, we've had quite a lengthy discussion already, but if you did want to speak to this, if you can just indicate that to me now, and if not, no, that's fine. I just have one thing, Janie, with regards to the draft constitution. Sorry, for the code of conduct. Forgive me. Is that so? Our current code of conduct seems to be written in the second person, but if we look at particularly item number 10. Well, from number 9, the interest and the gifts and hospitalities in the draft model code of conduct, it seems to be written in the first person, and I'm just thinking, well, that's absolutely fine. Does there need to be an acceptance of the model code of conduct by each member separately? I'm just how is this then owned by a member? Do they need to sign to say that they've seen it and received it?
Yes, because every member has an individual responsibility to adhere to the code. So if we introduce a new code, then yes, everybody will have to sort of sign acceptance to the new code.
Okay.
In terms of drafting the language, I think that demonstrates the change in writing style from 2012 through to 2021.
Right. Okay. And signing acceptance of the code of conduct, was that incorporated previously in our old?
So the signing of acceptance of the code of conduct is something that you do when you're first elected as a councillor. So that's part of your declaration of office that you sign when you're following the results and you sign to be a councillor. Your declaration of office states that you will uphold the code of conduct for the City of York, for being a member of the City of York Council. So what we do is we're changing the code is that everybody would ask to sign up to the new code if that's what we adopted going forward.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to look to move on. I just want to give members one last opportunity if they want to contribute. There appears to be no indications on that, but thank you for that piece of work, and thank you for the discussion around that. I'm sorry about the break that we had in between discussions there. So our next item on the agenda is item number 8, which is member development. And in a moment, I'm just going to ask Janie to speak to this. But you'll remember at our last meeting in January, myself and the Vice Chair were tasked with sitting down and looking at this and compiling some of our thoughts and some of the questions that would be put to the group leaders. And you'll see that's in the report there. So Jane, I'm going to hand over to you just to speak to this, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
So, thank you, Chair. So we've already discussed there are some elements of member development, and this is following on from the last occasion, from the last meeting, so putting the 4 questions together. Yeah. It's very clear that we do need to formulate a member development programme, and this is very much the starting block of canvassing group leaders and then ultimately their groups as well about the views to an attitude towards a member development program. What should it look like? Should it contain? How would you like to receive the training, for example? So if the committee is happy, we can circulate this to group leaders, put perhaps a time frame on for responses, if that helps. Okay. In the meantime, Rachel and I are happy to put together any further additional information you think might help in terms of what a program might look like, for example, or the different sort of training methods, for example. So it's really open for debate and discussion by the committee, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Janie. So I'm going to open it up, and Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a good report. All I would suggest is in item 3 under background, where it says who should monitor members, could we not put that in the passive and say how should members be monitored? Because what's at the back of my mind is that it all smacks of Big Brother a little bit if we have one person or one group of people monitoring members' participation in member development. And I think it might be better to, as some of the professional institutions do, is to monitor yourself, keep a diary, which is subject to periodic audit and random audit.
Yeah, good point. And again, I recognise that when myself and Councillor Rawlings and Rachel sat down to look at this, we did it very much with a view to group leaders and to groups, but I recognise that in our council we have two independents, and the assumption was that the independents would self-monitor, whereas the group leaders would be responsible for their group. But it's a very good point, David. Thank you, Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. I wonder if we should ask members about frequency of revisiting the training as well. When should refreshers take place? How often are some of these appropriate on an annual basis when elected? That kind of thing. It'd be interesting to get people's sense of how regularly they think they should come back to these issues.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Any other comments? Obviously, I'm aware that from the previous item on the agenda with regard to the code of conduct, again, revisiting that on a regular basis, I'm sure that'll be part of what we do in putting a more substantive member development package together. One of the slight concerns I had, and that's maybe a little bit too strong a word, but just the thoughts I had was whether our committee are the right custodians for this, and I did kind of share my thoughts with Janie, and Janie assured me that it was. Janie, do you want to just enlighten us a little bit more on that?
Because you've got the responsibility for the ethical governance of the council, member development really falls into that ethical umbrella. So it's the understanding of the skills that you need in order to become a better councillor, the skills you need to, for example, be a school governor, for example. And so it's more around the ethical development of members in terms of equipping with the skills you need in order to be a councillor and sit alongside, and obviously with the code of conduct as well, comply with the code of conduct. Ultimately, however, you are a council of committee of full council, so you're doing this on behalf of full council as a group of members, and also this committee is non-political, so it's not politically proportionate, which means therefore you come as a neutral view towards member development, and you also have the benefit of parish councillors who can give their views in terms of training, skill sets, etc. And there may be also sharing of training on occasions with parish councils. So those are my reasons. However, if you feel that it should be a different body, then obviously we're reviewing the constitution. There is a debate to be had as part of that, so we can make references to audit and governance committee. Going forward, you will work in probably more collaboration with audit and governance on issues like member development, etc., and the ethical governance framework. So so it seems a natural home to me at the moment, but obviously we can revisit it if you have different thoughts or ideas.
Yeah, no, I did have, but the conversations that you and I have had prior to this meeting made me kind of fall in line with your thought process. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think just on that point that it seems to be a natural point, a place for it to sit. When you start to think about other potential places for it to sit, that really doesn't work, I don't think. Whereas I think that for the reasons Janie has outlined, it does find a home within standards. And I was just wondering, when this document goes out to group leaders, etc. Are we going to give them some starting points for thought about this? Because if we just leave it too open-ended, I think we could get back a whole range of things, or nothing at all, in fact. And I just want us to get something back that is workable from our perspective and doesn't leave us in the same position we're at now.
Good point. Rachel, I think your hand up, and then also Janie if she wants to come back in, but Rachel.
Yes, I think in addition to asking those 4 questions of group leaders, I think we also need to give an idea around themes. I think we had a discussion in January around themes as well. So we can well, whilst we're going out and seeking views, we can seek views on any other themes and list some of the themes if that assists.
Yeah, Claire.
Can I just add that by way of example, we've already discussed in this meeting, code of conduct, for example, would be annual, a theme for annual. Safeguarding for children and adults, I would strongly recommend is annual training. And also there is a legal requirement for information governance for members and officers of the council to undertake annual information governance training. So that's data protection, for example. So those are examples that we would give as part of the thought process, where, for example, a discretionary training that we might need to offer is how, what skills do I need to become a school governor, for example? What skills do I need to attend my parish council? What about planning training? Planning training is another annual training I would suggest. Licensing, for example. So we could work through the various functions of the Constitution and help provide a list for some kind of theme for debate. I think building on what Councillor Douglas has said, I think that might be really helpful.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Douglas, I know you were about to come in before.
Yeah, sorry, it was just on that item. Thinking about motions that have been through council, there have been some that have suggested training for members around certain things. I know the most recent ones were section 106, which falls under planning, and then about trans rights and the trans inclusive council. I'm sure there are others going back that I can't remember, so I think that might be a place to look as well.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Carr, I'm going to bring you in a moment. I just want to clarify. Councillor Chambers, you had your hand up. I wasn't sure whether that was a stretch, a scratch of the head, or you want to participate.
Oh, apologies, Chair. No, I was just I was just stretching. It wasn't.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I am keen. I am, as we all are, to hear contributions from the parish councillors. So if you had indicated, I wanted just to give you that opportunity. Councillor Carr.
Chair, can I also suggest that? Oh, sorry.
It's all right. You go ahead, Jenny.
I've got a time delay. I think, on my computer. I'm so sorry. I think one area where you could work really effectively in collaboration with Audit and Governance Committee is around delivering training on whatever our new constitution may be as well. So might be a good example of where the two committees work together and look at the ethical and the sort of the constitutional governance framework. I think that might be a really good opportunity of doing something slightly different as well.
Good. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Carr.
That's all right. No problem. I was just going to pick up the monitoring officer's remarks about mandatory and discretionary training. It might be worth just expanding the paper to illuminate those two aspects. I mean, clearly there are some things that members have to do in terms of development, and there are some things that members should do in terms of development. And I just wonder whether we could bring that out in the paper. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So in terms of moving this forward, I mean, we've got the framework of the 4 questions there. So this is going to go to group leaders for them to have a look at. I take Councillor Douglas's point that we don't want this just to float on into the next months, weeks, and years. And I think it's important that we do have some kind of time frames on this. So Janie, it'll go to group leaders. Are we putting a prescriptive time for return on that?
I can do. Group fortnight, but also if I can say that's with a request to the information being shared with their groups. So I don't know how quickly information can be shared with groups and then fed back. So perhaps there's feedback either to yourselves as members of Joint Standards Committee and or to us. But I know that group leaders meets every fortnight, but then I think the groups need some time as well, just to answer the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So perhaps if you want to, if you could just dictate a time frame, that might help us.
So again, sorry, Councillor Douglas, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the Labour group meets on a formal basis about once a month. So, you know, that is when we would discuss something like this. So I think that time frame, likely we're not on our own there, has to be taken into consideration. Absolutely.
And I can just say that, you know, Conservative group meets as and when we can get the telephone box, and there's no kind of regular period on that one. What I think we should do is, I think we should obviously, this will go to group leaders. I'd like to think that it's going to be on our work plan, so we're going to review it at our next meeting. I'd like to think that a period of 4 to 6 weeks from going to the group leaders would give sufficient time for the group leaders to have a discussion with their members and get any feedback. So I think we ought to be saying, Jane, if you think that's acceptable, that we would like a reply, or you would need a reply back from group leaders, you know, within a kind of a 4 to 6 week time window. Does that seem okay? And my other question would be, obviously we have 2 independent members of the council, and I'm assuming that they would receive this just direct to them. Yes.
Yes, they would.
They would. Okay. I'm just looking for any final comments on this from anybody. Can I just have an indication that we're happy with the 4 to 6 week kind of time frame that we're looking at? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for that. So that brings us on to our next agenda item, which is the update on the international travel.
I'm sorry, Chair. I just need to leave. I'm afraid I've got another meeting to attend.
No, that.
Rachel's
with us,
remaining
isn't she?
in the meeting.
Lovely. That's fine. Thank you. And thank you for your help and your attendance, Janie.
Thank you.
We'll let you go, and then we'll move on. Lovely. Thank you. And forgive me, it was very remiss of me. Councillor Fisher, who is a member of this committee, wasn't able to join us at the beginning, but he is substituted by Councillor Corwick. So please forgive me for not mentioning that earlier, but welcome Councillor Corwick to substitute for Councillor Fisher. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is the update on the international travel protocol. This seems to have been an agenda item for our committee for an age. I could have been around the world in 80 days whilst this has been sat on our desk. But I think we're nearly there with this. Rachel, just speak to us about this, please.
Yes, I have on the annex document on page 53. I've put the track changes on, so I think members can see their suggested amendments from the last meeting. I've also made a note myself of Councillor Douglas's comments of the minutes of the last meeting in relation to travel not paid for by CYC, and it needs to be noted who did pay for that travel. So I'll make sure that is inserted into any draft going forward. I think the plan is that this is going to form part of the constitution.
Okay.
So I think if members are happy with the track changes, and if we can add Councillor Douglas's note of earlier this afternoon, then perhaps it can then be inserted into the draft constitution, which will then go forward to audit and governance before eventually going out for consultation and full council at that's the end of the road, full council.
Yeah. Good. And I do appreciate the work that's been done, and I do like I like the way in which this has been presented, so we can see the changes and the additions that have gone in there. And again, I'd want to make sure that we do include Councillor Douglas's comments, which brings me nicely on to Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at one of the changes, which is under the upon returning from an approved trip section, and it's bullet point 4. We've got clarify where requested the payment of any expenses during the trip. I think we thought a bit more strongly about than clarify where requested upon return. If requested, I think we thought that should be included as a matter of course, so that it was very clear as to quite how much this trip did cost the council or whoever else was paying for it, and we can see what expenses were incurred during that trip, as well as the cost of any flight and accommodation, for example. So I'd like to see that firmed up a bit, please.
I think that could be done quite easily by removing the where requested.
Or provide details of.
Provide details, but I agree with you, Councillor Douglas, that needs to be a requirement rather than a request. Is everybody happy with that change? Yeah, thank you. Any other comments on that international travel protocol? No, fine. Okay, thank you for that. And so we're going to go to our next item, which is the review of the work plan. And a number of items are going to come back on the work plan moving forward. So again, the LGA model code of conduct, that's going to come back on the work plan. The annual report, again, that'll just come back with any additions that we feel need to go in there. You will recall that we did have a conversation about the Parish Council Charter, and this is the point at which Councillor Chambers and Councillor Wardby suddenly prick up their ears. The Parish Council Charter, we were going to, we had indicated at the last meeting, and we were expecting Charlie Croft to come and give us a talk on the Parish Council Charter. He wasn't able to make that, and so he had offered to come to this meeting, but we were aware of the size of the agenda that we were looking at. So we have deferred that to July, and I understand that we've had confirmation that Charlie Croft will speak to us at our July meeting in regards to the Parish Council Charter. I'm happy to send out, particularly to Councillor Chambers and Councillor Wardby, any sight that I may have of his report prior to him coming to see us, so you get a sight of that. And again, for the City of York Council members, I can ensure that that's also distributed to you. I'm not saying that I will get a sight of it before anybody else, but if I do, I'll ensure that you get to see that. But in particular, I'm keen for the Parish Council members to get a good understanding of that before it comes to us. Again, the member development will come back on our work plan, but I suspect that at our July meeting, we will have been within the timescales that we've just agreed, the 4 to 6 weeks, and hopefully we'll have something a lot more robust at our July meeting that we can look at. There is one piece of work that I'd like to go on to the work plan, and I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Douglas. And one piece of work that I'd like to go on to the work plan, and that is the situation with regards to our independent persons. So you'll be mindful of the fact that we currently have David and Anghared as our independent persons. Constitutionally, and David will be aware of this, constitutionally, we only allow an independent person to sit as an independent person for 2 of the 4-year council periods. So it's kind of 8 years. Now, obviously, we don't throw anybody off the committee, but I'm mindful of the fact that David has been with us for a very long time, probably longer than any of us can recall, actually. And whilst I absolutely thank David for his work, it's been invaluable in what he does. And again, probably more for Councillor Walkley's benefit, the independent persons are those people that would look at initial complaints that come in, and along with the monitoring officer and with Rachel, will look at how they move that forward. And so they do have a valuable role to play. But I would like to look at how we look to recruit independent persons. So that's a piece of work that's going to come back on the work plan going forward. There is something already in motion with regards to recruiting independent persons, but that's something that I'd like to look at in terms of the work plan. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to clarify for everybody, we're talking about a June meeting, aren't we, rather than July? Is that right?
Forgive me if I said July, then that was a slip of the tongue. Our next meeting.
I know how these things can get propagated through the council system. So that's great.
It's our next meeting.
Yeah.
And we will still be longer than the 4 to 6 weeks that we're going to give group leaders to look at the members' development. So we'll still be able to have a document. But thank you for correcting me on that one.
Sorry.
And please, I apologise.
And my main point was that I'd like us to go back in time a bit. That I believe towards the end of 2019, well, in fact, I remember that the committee asked our monitoring officer at the time to show us examples of a public interest test, because under the report from the Ethical Standards in Public Life report, best practice number 6 is that the council publishes a public interest test that all complaints will be filtered against. And so we asked Suzanne, and then we've asked Janie as well, and we've still not seen anything. And I think we really need to take this up as a matter of urgency and fulfill those best practices that we all thought that we should be adhering to way back in 2019. So I'd like that to be added to the work plan if possible, please, Chair.
Yeah, I'm happy to add that. What I will say is that, and hopefully Rachel can help me out on this one, is that obviously with the new model code of conduct, so to anything that we look to do now with our current code of conduct is in a sense going to be superseded by the new code of conduct. So I'm more concerned about that being incorporated into the new code of conduct. And again, it may well be in there at some point. Councillor Douglas.
My understanding, Chair, is that it's not actually part of the code of conduct. It's a filter test that is used currently for all complaints that come in. And so even if it were needed to be updated, there must be a test there that is currently used by the monitoring officer and Rachel, and it should be published according to that report as best practice. So I think we can do it sooner rather than later, in fact.
Yeah. If it assists, the complaints procedure was last updated in January 2020. It's on the council's website, and that complaints procedure does feature the assessment. There's a assessment procedure as well. I mean, that can be revisited again if members want to look at that again. Yeah,
Claire.
My understanding, Rachel, is that this is something separate that sits outside the procedure, and it's a statement of when something or not would be deemed to be in the public interest to actually take forward as a complaint. And we've had members of the public raise with us as well previously that this isn't published overtly on the council's website, and that is considered to be a best practice. So I am looking to you for your expertise in this. Other councils do that in that manner. So I'd just like us to look at it, which is what we asked for twice already.
If I can just clarify, I'm just actually, while you were speaking, going on the council's website. I've typed in code of conduct. There's a link. I've clicked the link, and there are 3 documents. The top one is the complaints form, and you can download. The second one is the complaints procedure, you can download. The third document is called Joint Standards Committee Assessment Criteria for Complaints, which the public or anybody can access and download. And by all means, it's there. It can be reviewed again by the Joint Standards Committee, but it's there. It's not a hidden document. It's not hard to find. It's there with the complaint form and the complaints procedure. But happy to we could add it to the work plan.
Yeah, Claire.
Yes, and I think that the basis on which complaints are assessed is one thing, but a public interest test is another thing. And many councils have something that sits separately that outlines the public interest test. And we have asked for examples of a public interest test to be brought to us a couple of times. And I would like us to be able to review that, as long as other committee members feel that is appropriate as well.
Yeah. So I think just for clarity, let's bring it back at the next meeting. I mean, unfortunately, Janie's had to leave, and that in no way is questioning your ability, Rachel. But I think Janie would have a more I was going to say a clearer answer for Councillor Douglas there. But again, please don't take that in any way as a criticism, Rachel. But we'll bring it back at the next meeting, and then we can discuss that. Anything else? I mean, there's an awful lot that's on that work plan. Anything that anybody else feels is a burning issue? No. Okay. And again, just for clarity, can I indicate you're happy with what we've agreed to put on the work plan? If you just raise your hand. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us on to our final item agenda, which is item number 11, which is the monitoring officer's report. And at this point, you recall that we have agreed to exclude the press and public. So, sorry, before we do, Councillor Culloch, I've just seen your hand. You're on mute, Councillor Culloch. Happens to us all.
Thank you. When I was approached to substitute for this meeting, I said, as I've already indicated earlier, that I may be a little late because I had a medical appointment. I also had a further commitment at 5:30. So I hope you'll excuse me, but I will leave at this point.
Thank you. And thank you for your contributions, Councillor Culloch. Okay, so we are going to exclude the press and public. Thank you very much for those of you that have been watching, and I'm sure you'll join us again at our June meeting. But if we can now go into private session, please. Thank you.